To say that Darth Plagueis wasn't a believer in the Jedi Chosen One prophecy prior to the events of the Phantom Menace would be a major understatement. For Plagueis, the Jedi belief in a prophesied Chosen One who would destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force was merely a Jedi practice of expressed ritual and storytelling taken to the extreme, something that was the product of superstition and wishful thinking, rather than something that should be viewed as literal truth. However, in the final days of his life, the Chosen One prophecy would become an all-too-real horror for Plagueis, as his own actions during his reign as Dark Lord of the Sith led him to perceive that he was the catalyst for the Force striking back at him, by bringing into being an individual conceived by the Force itself who would destroy the Sith. And in these final days, while there would be much to fear from the Force and the eventual actions of Anakin, it would actually be the Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn who Plagueis would declare was the key to everything in this regard, with Qui-Gon the individual who held the future of both the Sith and Jedi orders in his hand, able to shape the course of galactic history. In this video expose, we'll look at the moment when Darth Plagueis recognized the importance of Qui-Gon Jinn to the survival of the Sith, and explain why Plagueis saw him as a terrifying component to the Chosen One prophecy. The reason why Plagueis evolved from someone who rejected the Chosen One prophecy to someone who feared it immensely has to do with the actions he would carry out himself. As a very brief recap, it was Plagueis who would be the architect of his own demise, and the secret that he took to the grave with him could arguably be viewed as the reason why the Sith would be destroyed. Roughly a decade before the events of Episode 1, Plagueis and Sidious set out to assault the Force and leave their mark on the galaxy by tipping the balance of the Force towards the dark side, a paradigm shift of immeasurable importance. After months of meditation and waging a war against the Force itself for sovereignty, the Sith succeeded and brought the power of their combined will to bear on the Force, suffusing the galaxy with the power of the dark side. This success would only embolden Plagueis, and drunk on his newfound powers and understanding of the Force, he unilaterally, without the knowledge of Sidious, attempted to bring a forceful being into creation, something that Plagueis believed had never been accomplished before. Like he had done months earlier, Plagueis boldly stretched out to dominate the Force, reaching out to make his presence known to every living entity in the galaxy. However, not only did Plagueis fail, but the Force grew silent and retreated from him as if it rejected the Dark Lord personally. Plagueis remained undeterred about the ultimate success of the Sith, and he would keep all of this information from Sidious, but Plagueis knew he stepped too far in this case. He knew that he and Sidious had tipped the balance towards the dark side, but he also knew there was an eventual cost that would have to be paid. Demonstrating a tremendous understanding about the Sith's struggle with the Force, Plagueis was keenly aware that it could strike back at them, and recognized in the months prior to Episode 1 that it was a more dangerous time than any other he experienced because of this. With this knowledge, you can imagine Darth Plagueis' shock when Anakin Skywalker and his story emerged from the planet of Tatooine. Plagueis gained knowledge of Anakin through information that Dooku passed along to Darth Sidious in his alter ego Palpatine, with Sidious immediately informing his master what the Jedi High Council was discussing about the boy from Tatooine. This is where Qui-Gon Jinn became exceptionally important to Plagueis. As Plagueis would learn through Dooku, Qui-Gon believed three startling facts about Anakin. First, Anakin stood at the center of a vergence in the Force. Second, Anakin was the Chosen One of Jedi prophecy, who would destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. And third, Qui-Gon's finding Anakin was the will of the Force itself. For Plagueis, these conclusions were terrifying, as along with the timeline matching up perfectly for Anakin's creation to coincide with Plagueis' actions with the Force a decade earlier, Qui-Gon had pretty much on his own uncovered and defined his greatest fear. It's a bit hard to explain, but the Darth Plagueis novel positions Plagueis and Qui-Gon as mirror opposites. Whereas Plagueis saw the importance of these events from the point of view of the dark side and someone who was the catalyst for the Force's retaliation, Qui-Gon saw their importance from the point of view of the light side. Given everything that Plagueis knew and feared in this regard, he understood that Qui-Gon had uniquely and really almost impossibly read the situation perfectly, as if the Force had truly sought him out to play an important role in the downfall of the Sith. Not many Jedi, if any, could put these pieces together, and Qui-Gon did so in the most frightening way possible for Plagueis. In fact, when Plagueis thought about the likelihood that Qui-Gon would sway the High Council members to go against their own rules to train someone so far above the acceptable age for initiates, Plagueis couldn't help but believe he had undone the Sith Order and doomed their grand plan. The situation would only get worse for Plagueis. Determining that he had to see Anakin Skywalker for himself, the Dark Lord rushed to get whatever glimpse of him he could. The best he could do was to obtain a position on a public observatory on Coruscant overlooking the landing platform containing Queen Amidala's royal starship. Looking down on Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, Plagueis would watch as Qui-Gon knelt down to speak to Anakin. Not able to understand what they were saying, it's then that Plagueis reached out with the Force to see whatever visions of the future he could. Immediately, the Dark Lord was assaulted by images of the future, containing scenes of ferocious Clone Wars battles, lightsaber duels, and even Darth Vader rising from a table. Of course, Plagueis wouldn't know exactly what all of this meant, but by the time he removed himself from the onslaught, Qui-Gon and Anakin were gone. But Plagueis knew the truth. Qui-Gon had been correct the entire time, just as he was afraid of. The boy from Tatooine would go on to change the course of history, and this was a fact Plagueis couldn't simply dismiss. Importantly for our video here, it's then that Plagueis makes a pretty surprising conclusion. Qui-Gon was the key to everything. Not Anakin, not the assault from the Force, but Qui-Gon. In this regard, Plagueis could think of only one way to prevent what he feared the most. Maul would have to kill Qui-Gon to prevent Anakin from being trained as a Jedi and threatening the plans of the Sith. It's a great scene from the Darth Plagueis novel, and says a lot about Plagueis' fear and respect for Qui-Gon. Knowing that he couldn't simply kill Anakin, as that would do nothing to prevent the retaliation of the Force in the long run, I think Plagueis thought the best he could hope for was Anakin simply not being trained, and thus sent back to Tatooine until a better plan could be developed. In this way then, Qui-Gon represented the fulcrum on which the success of the Sith stood. The Jedi Master had been correct in every way in Plagueis' view, having somehow uncovered the Jedi Chosen One that was once easily dismissed. And thus, given the successes Qui-Gon achieved in this regard, the final success of Qui-Gon was the one that Plagueis feared the most, that Anakin be trained as a Jedi and allowed to fulfill the prophecy. It's this reason why when Plagueis had to choose his next step, he focused only on the death of Qui-Gon, as the Jedi Master was the immediate issue that had to be solved and that which Plagueis feared. Of course, Plagueis would himself be killed by his apprentice Sidious before he would learn of Qui-Gon's death on Naboo. But had he lived, it would have been interesting to see how the Dark Lord would have dealt with the fact that Qui-Gon's death served as the catalyst for Anakin being trained rather than the opposite. Even worse for the Sith, with Plagueis never divulging the truth of his actions with the Force, Sidious put his own plan into motion to eventually take Anakin as his own Sith apprentice, not knowing the potential attack that might come from the Force itself. So there we have it, the moment that Plagueis saw Qui-Gon Jinn as the biggest threat to the Sith grand plan. Thank you very much to all of the Patreon members of Star Wars Reading Club, as your support is so greatly appreciated. You can find all of our social media links and a link to our Star Wars gaming channel in the description below for updates and even more Star Wars content. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me... for knowing Plagueis is out there somewhere.